Hey everyone, welcome to a very special review of Severed. I'm actually joined with Steven, and we're going to just talk for, I don't know, a little while about this very special PlayStation Vita game. So right off the bat, what are some of your impressions?
Well, the first thing that came to mind as soon as I started playing this is that it felt similar to Guacamelee for me. Uh, it's a first-person dungeon explorer, but I almost feel like it's a Metroidvania game. Did you get that same sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I find because of the backtracking and things like that and the power-up system and yeah, it's almost like a first-person dungeon crawler slash Metroidvania game.
Yeah, so I was very pleasant by that. Uh, First thing, I don't know if you want to start with that. I want to really start with the storyline because for me it's one of the game's strengths, and I don't know. I don't know if I've ever played a game that made me feel this uneasy throughout the adventure because this is one of those rare games that doesn't start well and doesn't end well. There's no Disney happy ending here, but it's super emotional and it doesn't really say much. All of its storyline is told with the game's art. That's it. There's very few cutscenes. There's very few dialogue. It's all told through the visuals, and those are my favorite type of games.
Yeah, it's like for those that recall something like Super Metroid, if you go back and you remove the opening cinematic of Super Metroid, it's incredible how much story that game actually says, even though there's no dialogue whatsoever. And in this case, it's almost like the story is in the background, almost like yeah, there's dialogue um, and there's some cutscenes and things like that, but it's kept to such a minimum amount. And you're right, like you feel uneasy because this is a very dark, gritty game, and that to me was the biggest difference between this game and Guacamelee. With Guacamelee, it was very lighthearted, even though there was some dark overtones and things like that for sure. I still found, there was still humorous elements to it. With this, there's no humor here at all. This is really, I mean, other than that bird creature, this is really a really dark game. And even I forget her name, but you meet this NPC
The Wanderer.
throughout the Wanderer. That the twist, which I'm not going to spoil for anybody, but the twist with that was really sad, man. Like I didn't see that coming, and yeah, just overall, it's just a very melancholy type of game. Very dark, very uneasy, and yeah, definitely one of the game's strengths. It's a fantastic storyline considering how little story there actually is.
Yeah, just the first time you see Sasha, the first time you see her is through the mirror, and that image is something I think anybody should experience. It's just that's the way you tell the story without actually putting everything in the gamer's face. You just let the gamer play the game and let the emotions and the art and the visuals speak for themselves.
Okay, and that's a perfect segue to talk a little bit about the art and the audiovisual presentation as a whole. The graphics I found reminded me a lot of Guacamelee. Like, it seemed like that same sort of art style, except obviously a lot darker. I really liked just the way everything came together. For those that don't know, as you can see actually in the video footage, basically the game is made up of a series of individual rooms. So even if you're outside, it's one screen. Think of it like the original Legend of Zelda. That's the way it's broken up. And I really like that. I really like that as I moved from one to the next, it was just this natural flow, and it looked really good. I really liked how they were able to diversify the areas from the three main dungeons, or whatever you want to call them, and even the environment as a whole. It's not all monotonous. It doesn't all look the same. They were able to do subtle cues here and there And overall, this isn't a very long game. I platinumed the game in 7 hours and 12 minutes, and I think I finished it in 5 hours. So it's not a very long game, but I really appreciated the way they were able to do that, where everything doesn't look the same. And the audio effects, or sound effects, and music as a whole, it's kept very much in the background, the music. It's very ambient, and obviously it ramps up as you get into to battles and things like that. But I don't know, I thought it really did have that complete package, as I like to say.
Yeah, no, this is a very it's it's just a stunning game, and it has a lot, I feel, of the Mexican culture influence of Guacamole. And I might be absolutely wrong. I've never been to Mexico. Basically, many countries you have a bit more travel experience, so maybe you have a bit more cultural experience. But it just seemed like they followed kind of something started with Guacamole with the art style.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know about the Mexican influences or not there myself, but it definitely shares a lot of the darker side of Guacamelee. So let's talk a little bit about the gameplay. So, I mean, the big thing right here, and it's probably the biggest element that turned off or turns off a lot of people, is the fact that essentially the entire combat system is wrapped around touchscreen. So tell me your thoughts on that.
I don't know how the game could work without that. Like I've talked in a previous podcast how I thought they should eventually, and they might eventually port this to other consoles, and I'm sure there will be workarounds, but I just don't know how the game would work without those touchscreen controls because they are very accurate. I had maybe a few times when I thought that I did the correct swipe and the game missed, but besides that, it's very strategic and it's very action, so it makes you feel connected to the game at all time, and you always need to be involved, which I like. Like it's not like an RPG where sometimes you can press X X X X X and like win battles and battles. This one you really need to be connected, and it gets extremely challenging fast. The thing is, though, that the encounters are kept to a minimum, and the punishment for dying is not present. So there's not really any punishment for failure. But that being said, I did find that at some I could not really make myself comfortable playing this for long periods of times. And this is a game that once you start playing, you just can't put down. And I found that I was constantly like trying to massage my hands or put them against the wall to kind of like negate the cramps and whatnot. I don't know about you. I just had trouble playing the game for long periods of time.
Didn't really notice anything cramp-wise or anything like that, but I did find that unlike how probably you played it, or millions of other people, well, actually millions, yeah, um, basically, if I held the PlayStation Vita as you would normally hold it, whenever I got into battle, and just so those of you understand how this works, so you go from one room to the next room and you'll see like a little flame, and if you go to that screen with the flame, you're sucked into a battle. And battles can be one-on-one or all the way up to 4 different types of creatures, and each creature has their own strength and weakness and how to take them down. So for example, one creature might have a bunch of eyeballs or that will open up at certain times, and you have to hit those eyeballs to release that one main creature or whatever that you can slash to get rid of. And then another one might be like a 4-armed creature that is constantly dodging your attacks, so that you have to really hit it or swipe at it at a specific angle in order for you to inflict damage. So anyways, the way I play it is I actually don't use my thumb. I noticed that on videos that I had seen, a lot of people were using their right thumb to do the slash move. I didn't. I actually used my index finger on my right hand side, so my wrists started to get a little bit sore on my left hand side, because essentially I played the entire game holding the Vita with just one hand, because I'd constantly be using my index finger for swiping and whatnot, and I found it worked really, really well. Like, I was able to take down guys with relative ease. But there's one element with the combat system that I wasn't sure I was going to like, and that is the buff system. See, the way this works is that as more and more enemies, well, not enemies, but the more powerful enemies get, or in other words, like the more you progress, the more they start to learn these buffs. And buffs can mean anything from increased speed so that they'll attack you quicker, and in order to deflect an attack, you simply have to swipe in the exact angle that the incoming attack is going to have. So in other words, say like top right hand corner of the screen diagonal, you just swipe diagonal to the top right hand corner of the screen, and that's it, you've deflected that attack. And anyway, so back to these buffs. So there's ones that speed up, there's defensive ones, there's magical blockers, there's all kinds of different things, attacking ones. And at first, when you first start to play and these are slowly introduced, it's not so bad. It's really not so bad. But as the game increases in difficulty, it can get, at least I found that there was one or two fights that I was starting to get a little bit frustrated. But thankfully, you're not alone. You have quite a few power-ups to help you out. But first off, what did you think of the buffs? Did they ever annoy you, or you found they were okay?
By the time the buffs got really crazy, my character was so overpowered that it did not matter much. As long as the enemy did not have the magical block buff, I was fine because I could just use one of my magic spells and win easily. But the monsters with the magic block, those always screwed with me because I could not use my regular strategy, and there were a few fights where most, if not all, the monsters present had magical buffs, so you had to use strategy. But they didn't bother me that much because they don't appear until the second area, and like the game eases them in, so you have plenty of time to adapt. And if you're like, I wasn't very good at this game at the beginning, and still at the end I wasn't very good, but the game still gave me plenty of basically, when you do a fight well, you get the opportunity to sever the opponent and collect their parts, which you can then upgrade your character. And by the third area, my character was almost fully maxed out. And there are some abilities you unlock that really do help you out a lot. And like I said, like you were telling me, you were in the second area and you had only died like twice or something. And I had died like maybe 20, 30 times at that point. So I'm not really good at that game, but the game still gave me plenty of opportunity to upgrade my character. So at no point did I ever feel like the game became too hard. That being said, there were some increase in that fights that were extremely frustrating. But then again, when you die, you start right there.
Yeah.
So you can just, and the fights don't last long. Like fights usually takes like even the last boss maybe is a 3 minute fight because they can't be long because your finger gets tired and whatnot, so you need breaks. Even at one point I noticed that my index had friction on it, and I had to stop because I was hurting myself because I was swiping too much because I was doing the same fight like over and over. So it's designed in a way that you can't have a 10-minute fight here because obviously it wouldn't work. So that, like I said, when you die, you start right there, and even if it's a 30-second fight, it's really hard. Well, it's only 30 seconds. You can try again because there is one fight in this game that it is extremely hard.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I never got to the point where I was frustrated and saying like, "Oh, this sucks," sort of thing. Never had that. Overall, I mean, you mentioned the power-ups, which was good too. There's a couple of key power-ups. There's one that allows you to blind your enemies, which can also be used. Every power-up, by the way, can not only be used in combat, but can also be used in exploration. So that blinding power-up also allows you to see things that may potentially not be there in the current realm that you're in. Then there's one that allows you to steal a power-up or two, depending on how far you level it up. Some of those magical buffs, you can take them from enemies and put them on you, and then you can also use that eating or crunching ability while you're exploring. And the exploration reminded me a lot of the original Phantasy Star on the Master System, believe it or not, because of the way it's in first person. And I found myself constantly looking at the map while I was playing, looking for every little question mark. And that was the other thing I just wanted to mention very briefly, is the game is very, very user-friendly. Normally in Metroidvania games, you're pretty much screwed. Like, it's up to you to find out where the secrets are. Here, the game helps you. It tells you, okay, there is a secret here, but that's it. So you know that it's in that area, you just don't know exactly how to go about finding it. And the two of us, we got stuck at the same ones more than once, which was good. I really like that, because it's showing that, you know, it doesn't need to be cheap in order to make it challenging to explore everything.
One thing I like about this game for the puzzles is that I think every puzzle that you encounter can be solved right away. Except
Yeah,
for the times where there's a mark that tells you need a specific power up. But when you see a question mark and you can reach that room, I might be wrong here, but I think 100% of the time you can actually solve it right away. You don't need to come back later on. And that's something that I really like, because there's a few puzzles and they're all very, very clever. There's one that I asked you, I thought that I had to go back later, but it turns out that there was like a blue switch that was just hiding behind some bushes. Very, very easy to miss. And I must have checked that room like 10, 15 times, and I was certain that there was something that I needed to come back later on, but it just turned out that there was a cleverly hidden switch. So puzzle solving in this game, very cleverly done.
Yeah, I think as a whole, this is just a very good game. My closing comments, if I may, is just that this is a game that really a lot of people should pick up. If you own a PlayStation Vita, this is certainly a game to check out, because it really is the whole package. And I know some people might say, it's only, 7 hours to platinum, what's that all about? But it's actually the perfect length for this type of game. I wouldn't change almost anything. This is a really, really good game that I really hope that we can convince at least one or two of you guys to go and
Yeah,
purchase.
there are.
And it's
Sorry.
no, go ahead.
Like you mentioned the time. I just want to mention that this is a $15 game,
Yep.
and in my opinion, it's worth 60. There are $60 games out there that you won't play for 7, 8 solid hours. So time is not an issue here, because for me it ends at the perfect time, and it ends me leaving a bit more, wanting a bit more, which is always good. It's always a good sign when you want a bit more. I wish they would do a Severed 2 eventually. I don't think that's gonna happen, but like this is an awesome, awesome game. Maybe my only complaint besides the hand cramps, which is not really something. It's not really the game's fault. It's a design issue. Is I the only other first-person dungeon I played was Shining the Holy Ark, and in that game I used the D-pad. Same thing with this. If you go a step too far, you can just back up. In this game, you can't back up. It's a really, really, really minor complaint, but I thought it would have been a bit better if you could have sidestepped or backed up, but you can't. And a new game plus would have kicked ass. Like, be able to go back, replay the game with all your power ups. I would have loved that, because it would have given me an excuse to run through the game again, which I really want to do.
Yeah, that's perfect. Actually, I totally forgot about the backup thing. That's absolutely right. And yeah, new game plus, certainly that would have been rather enjoyable.
I'm sure that there might be DLC, because Guacamelee had DLC, so I would love that. But like this, for me, how high does this rank? Do you prefer Guacamelee over this? Is this in your top 5 Vita game?
Ooh, that's a very good question. Definitely on my top 5 Vita games. Man, I think top 3 Vita games. I don't know what my top Vita games, like, I actually don't know what my top is. I know that I really enjoyed Uncharted Golden Abyss, I really enjoyed Guacamelee, and I really enjoyed this. So I'd say the 3 of those games are probably my favorite games on the Vita.
Yeah,
And you?
yeah. For me, I think just for the storyline, like I said, this game really left a mark. The ending is fantastic. I have to give it a slight edge over Guacamole for now. We don't know how that may change with time. But for now, like this, probably probably my favorite game of the year so far, and we'll see if that stacks up at the end of the year. You really, guys, you need to go. I know some of you have a Vita out there. You need to go pick it up. I think you even have a 10% discount if you're a PS Plus member, and even if you don't, it's only $15. Buy that. Drinkbox deserves the attention. They've been putting out nothing but masterful games so far. That's all they've done. Support these guys. They're Canadian like we are. Need to support your fellow Canadian developers, and they just make fantastic games. And Severed is one of those games that, in my opinion, is one of the best portable game of all time.
Yeah, I agree, man. I'll second that. This is an absolutely fantastic game, and it's right now it's my favorite portable game of the year. Something else has popped up that been, I think, my favorite game of the year so far, but that's for a review for another day.
Well,
So
by the time
thank-
it should be out by the time you see this, actually.
maybe. Classic.
I mean, the review should be out. It's just you always
Yeah.
forget these things when you talk.
Always. So that's it. That's perfect, actually. So, guys, we hope you enjoyed this little review. Let us know if you like this format. We could potentially do this again for a couple of other things. And above all else, like Steven said, go pick up Severed. It's a fantastic game.